Walking through the streets, see the lines defined, diverging diamonds, safety intertwined. Pavement markings clear, guiding us right. Public outreach connects, vision in sight. Cars moving smooth in a rhythmic dance. Designed for safe paths, taking no chance. Communication flowing like beats in the day. 90s East Coast vibe, guiding the.
Hello yet again, and welcome back to Civil Visualizing with Sam. This is episode 2, and in this episode, we're going to take this beautiful base model provided from Joshua Bears at Ardura. I've linked them in the show notes, so thank you for their use of this model. This is a diverging diamond in Florida, and this was made in Openroads Designer. And just as a note, Joshua has a lot of experience with 3D modeling and visualization, and so this model may be further along than some Openroads Designer models, but you can see he's got things like barrier rail, striping, curb and gutter, light poles, traffic signals, a lot of other elements that may not always exist in an Openroads design file. But there is a feature within Openroads Designer where you can export to SketchUp, and so that's what has been done. And then this is in SketchUp here, so we can review our model, our base model, and see if we're ready to bring it into Civil Engine. And as a note, I've already worked through a lot of this, and so you'll see me speed through some of this, but I kind of want to walk through my process and how I got to that final result, even though I won't be showing every single step along the way. Some of the notes, when you review a model like this, you're going to see these gaps. These are things that we probably need to fill in SketchUp. For example, we can take this and we can find these edges. It might be easier to explode something like this, but you don't always have to. Sometimes we can just create it on top. And then once you have those, you can go and select whatever text you want and just paint it on there, just so that that's going to be easier once we bring it into Civil Engine. Also, we have some issues like, the striping isn't perfect, but you'll see here pretty quickly that it actually came in to Civil Engine in pretty good shape, and we will be doing some cleanup in there. So this is what the model looks like in SketchUp. Again, this is a project in Florida, and to export, you go File, Export, and it's dropping over here on my other screen, but I'll show you what that box looks like once it opens up. It's like this, and we want to go to Options, and we can use these settings, Export Texture Maps, and you can use centimeters or meters, but just make sure you select centimeters or meters to match up with it when you import it into Civil Engine. So once that's exported, then you can go to Civil Engine and you can import your file. As a reminder, this is fall of 2024. We're still in the alpha phase of our testing. This version that you're looking at is actually a little bit further along than alpha, so if you are testing alpha, there may be some features that you don't have access to. But this getting started menu may look a little different to you in the future than it does right here in fall of 24. So to get started, we want to go to Import, Base Model. We want to find that file. Again, I exported as an OBJ, so let's change this to OBJ, and that's Florida DDI. And then we want to make sure that that is centimeters. Most of these defaults should be able to be left as is, and then we want to do Finish Import right here. All right, so when you're in Civil Engine, your model may look something like this, and that's obviously not how we want the final look to be, and that's fine because we need to first start by texturing. We have this menu on the side. Let me just briefly walk through some of the basics of Civil Engine. To navigate, you're going to use your scroll wheel to zoom in and out, your left click to pan left to right, up, in and out, and then you want to do right click and drag to orbit, and that's going to kind of try and grab that center point of the mesh and orbit around that point. And then one other really cool trick is to zoom into a certain place. You can just right double click, and that's also going to recenter that orbit point. All right, so over here on the right side we have our menu. We have our import panel here at the top left. We've already imported our base model, but you can import other assets later on in the process. we have our assets, paths, areas, hierarchy, traffic, environment, phasing, settings, and example projects. And we're not going to go through all those in this Civil Visualizing with Sam, but I just want to give a high-level overview and show that right now we want to go to the hierarchy, and we want to go to base models. And if we click this down caret, it's going to show us all of these submesh components. And when we select them, this box over here on the left opens up, and this is how we can attach different textures from the texture library within Civil Engine. And we want to do that because obviously this isn't the way we want it to look. We want to use the photorealistic textures within Civil Engine. So if we want the texture to look realistic, then we can click this brush icon, and then we want to select one of these textures from the drop down. And if you zoom in, you can see that these are high quality textures that we've tried to spend a lot of time selecting some of the best textures possible. And for now I'm going to select this light texture here. If you want to find the other submesh components, for now you just have to keep going down this list. In the future we'll have more advanced texturing options, including possibly dragging and dropping materials or painting materials into the scene. Here you can see we have concrete elements, so the same process. We want to go and find one of the concrete textures, and you can zoom in to see if that's the texture that you would like to use, and once you're happy with it you can leave it and continue moving on. Alright, so as mentioned before, I already did this process, so I'm going to show how that turned out. Alright, so this is the result of how everything looks after the texturing has been completed. There are a couple different types of grass textures, and we chose grass texture number 3. And for the asphalt, we chose the default asphalt cracked 1, and we chose the light version. And then down here for the fresh paving, we chose the darker version. So some of this is subjective, some of this is art, and I invite you to kind of look through those textures and learn the texture library so that you can apply the best textures to make your project look as realistic and representative as possible. Alright, so again, this project is in Florida, and so we want to add some landscaping, and to do that we can go to our library assets and go to trees. We have over 700 library assets, and I know where these are. If you can't find what you're looking for, you can also always just search down here in the bottom. So we could search palm to find the trees that we want, and then let's try this one, and now we can start placing them just by left click, and it will continue to place them, and it's also following the terrain as it does that automatically. Once those have been placed, you can select them and make adjustments. Over here this dialog box opens up, so we can make fine-tune adjustments to things like rotation and scale, or we can use the gizmo here in the 3D space. Every time you place something, it shows up here in the hierarchy. So all of these coconut trees that I've placed show up here. I just did shift and I held it down and clicked them to select all of them. And now we can right click and we can wrap that in a folder. And now that that's in the folder, we can turn off visibility, we can lock them. And one reason we want to lock is because we have these selector icons, and they automatically kind of show up near wherever your mouse is. And you want to, sometimes you want those if you want to edit those, but if you don't, if you're done placing trees, you don't want those selector icons to show up. So the way you do that is you just lock them, and that way we can't edit them anymore until we unlock them. Putting them in folders also helps us with our organization and with phasing, if any of that is of interest to you in your project. We can also rename the folder once we unlock it. So again, great for organization and for working. And then one other thing too, if you're working and your project starts slowing down because you have so many assets, you can put all of your trees, for example, or your vehicles into a folder, and then you can turn them off, and that way you can continue to work without it slowing you down in the process. Alright, paths is one of the most powerful parts of Civil Engine, and there are several different categories, but it all uses the same underlying system. And everything you see over here on the right, these are path presets. So these are just for your convenience to quickly place paths. But this is in no way limiting of the types of paths that you can place or the customizations you can do of them. So let's start out by placing a traffic path. And as a note again, this is in the alpha version, and so we don't have the intersection controllers working yet, but we do have traffic following along these paths, and we can also adjust the traffic speed and density at this point. And I'm clicking to place these points, and then I'm also clicking and dragging to drag the camera as I'm doing this. And these nodes follow the terrain just like when you're placing assets. And so this is how you can place your traffic paths.
Watch the signs of the line, safe travels ahead. Signs so prime, East Coast echoes, memories in rhyme, transportation moves, moving in time.
Alright, so there is our traffic path. And again, when you place it, it's going to show up in the path portion of our hierarchy. So we can select that. And you can't select paths unless either the hierarchy with the paths are open, or if you're in the paths section of the menu. If you're in some other portion of the UI, like let's say that you're here, you won't be able to select those paths. So we need to exit out of that. If we want to select it, we can select it in 3D space, or we can select it 3D space like here, or we can select it from the hierarchy if we want to select that to edit the parameters. So paths have different asset slots. So this one has two. It has asset slot number 1, which is our moving traffic, and asset slot number 2, which is our wear path. And wear paths are something that are rather subtle, but also very important because it is how roads actually look. Over time they wear. Some of this is from tires, some of this is from oil dropping on the ground. But by adding these wear paths, we're gonna get a much more realistic effect of our model. And so that's asset slot number 2. If you don't like the wear paths, you can always just delete that slot. We could add more asset slots to this, and you could add up to 5 different asset slots per path. Alright, so let me turn my visualizers back on to show where our paths are and continue working with these. So in addition to vehicles for our animated paths, we can do cyclists and pedestrians, and we have this path over here. So for example, let's just place some nodes of our bicycle path, and you can see bicycle paths come in green by default, the path visualizer. And these path visualizers, they are for your convenience to be used, but they don't show up when you render and when you're Explorer mode, and you can also turn them off at any time down here in the bottom right. Alright, if I want to do pedestrians, then I'll click on the pedestrian preset. These ones are yellow by default, and these are walking pedestrians, but we also have jogging pedestrians, and then we also have a combined, it's called shared use, and that is if you're doing a shared use path and you wanted to not only show cyclists, but you wanted to show jogging pedestrians and scooters, then this uses 3 of those asset slots to do all 3 of those different pedestrian types in one path preset. So that's for your convenience and can hopefully help speed up your process if you are doing a shared use path. Alright, continuing through paths, we can do vegetation. So I already showed you how to place trees one by one, but you can place them along the path using this path preset. So we have this median here. Let's say that we want to place some palm trees there, kind of around the edge. And so we can do this path around the edge, like that. And once they're placed, then we can make adjustments here in the dialog box on the left. We can adjust the spacing. You could even do it in real time like this, or maybe you know exactly what your spacing should be. You can type that in. Let's say we want 40 feet. You can also do longitudinal offset if you need them to be adjusted along the length of that path. You can do that as well. You can do vertical offset if you want them to go up or down. You can do internal and external offset if you want them to be off that path. And we can even change the path preset. So if we wanted a different palm tree, we can search palm here, press enter, and that's going to limit the list. This list naturally has all of the 700 assets, so obviously we don't want those. So we can do that, and you can see here they come in too big in this case, and so we just go to scale, let's link the scale, and then we want to downsize that. When you change the asset, it may change the spacing because each asset has a default spacing, but we can adjust that back. So I invite you to look at those dialog box, look at the dialog box, and just kind of get to know all of the different values that you can adjust for the different assets and their properties in there. If we continue on down our paths presets, we have rail and fence. So you can see here we have barrier rail that we brought in from our base model. But let's say that we wanted to do some barrier rail from a path preset here in Civil Engine. We have different types of barrier rail styles in here. So if we want to do a single slope barrier rail, and if we wanted to do it over on this side of the median, then we can do it here. And those automatically curve along the nodes that you place. You can see here that this single slope face is going the other direction, and maybe if we wanted to flip it, there are a few options. One, we could just replace the paths. Two, we could go to mirror, and that will flip the path. Or we could even go to base Z and change that to 90 degrees. So there are a number of ways that we can flip the path. And also, if we want to expand the path, let's say that you placed it but you want to continue going, then we can go to expand path, and that will just pick up wherever you left off. And you can continue placing those nodes. And I did not do a great job. Let's say we want to delete this, select it, delete it, select it, delete it. And there we go. So now we're going to get more natural curve. And we do hope to have more options for editing those nodes in the past in future versions of Civil Engine. Alright, so I want to show again the power of using multiple asset slots. So let's add another asset slot here. Let's say we want to do a fence on top. We don't have to place another path. All we have to do is find fence, filter out fences by typing it into the drop down. Let's say we want to use fence number 1. And now you can see here that fence is assigned to that same path, but it's not how we want it to be, so let's vertically offset it. We can fine tune it. And then let's do external offset, and now we have it positioned just the way we want it to be. And then the beauty of this is now we can go and adjust those parameters or those nodes, and those asset slots will be connected together. So this is just one example, but there are a ton of ways that you could use this. Like for example, maybe we want to do, actually let's just do it right here. Let's say that we want this traffic path, but we want cones alongside it. So let's find that path, let's select it, and then let's go to add asset slot, and let's do barrels. And then we can find a barrel orange, and by default it's going to go down the middle, but we can just go to external offset. And now we have cones all the way along that path, and we don't have to place another path. And again, we can adjust the spacing and offset and the scaling and all of those parameters for that individualized offset. So paths are very useful, and I invite you to kind of play around with them and see if you can find new uses that maybe we haven't even thought about. All right, some of the other favorites in these path presets are things like guardrail, and having bendable guardrail is something that we've wanted for a long time, and now we finally have it in Civil Engine. You can see here that one goes up pretty high, following the terrain, and it still bends and curves, so you can do that. And we have some really neat fence types as well in our presets. You could make your own custom fence if you wanted to import the pieces individually, and that's another thing about paths is they work if you went to asset imported an asset, you could find it through searching for it and it would show up in that drop down. So you could make your own path presets if you wanted, and you can also adjust all the parameters of them. So let's say that we wanted our spacing not to be 10 feet but to be 5 feet, and now we've done that. So there are even more of those, including things like sound walls and retaining walls. And so I invite you to check all those out and check out the example projects we have. Some of these have used a lot of these paths, and if you're looking at a future version, this diverging diamond might even be one of the example projects that you can look at for yourself. All right, so I'm not going to show every single different type of path, but there are other categories like construction, poles, like light poles and power poles, and then there are pavement markings. And pavement markings is one of the best utilizations of this path system. Again, all the same system, but it is leveraging different assets in different ways to make placement of these as easy as possible. So we talked about in SketchUp, some of the striping was going to come in correctly and some of it wasn't. And some of the striping that didn't come in correctly was the yellow striping. And so I know there's a yellow stripe here, and I can go and place this stripe along here. And you could also place on top of this stripe and then go into the submesh component and turn off the visibility or delete that. And that's another way to place striping. So let me place this and then I'll show how we can adjust it and show why it might be more useful to use this type of striping. So you'll notice here this first one I didn't really place right, so I'll just delete that and then that's going to flatten out. These stripes by default have this much more realistic texture, so you can see here in conjunction with, I'll turn off our visualizers so you can see even better. This stripe in conjunction with our realistic asphalt just makes for a more photorealistic look. And they're also just a few inches offset and the shadows are turned off. And so that's really going to help the striping not be distracting. You can see here what it's doing is when I was placing it, it was following some invisible assets that have been turned off. So we just need to go and adjust some of these nodes so that we can get our striping where we want it to be. All right, so you might say, well, that stripe looks nice, but that's not the type of striping we have where I live. And that's great because we can adjust these. So over here on the left, you can see we have a lot of parameters. So spacing right here, it's really tight because this is what we call a striping unit. And this is striping unit yellow. And it's basically squished together and spaced really tightly. And that's how we can get it to bend the way that it's bending. And so here we don't want to change the spacing because we want it to be solid. But let's say we wanted it to be a 10-inch. I can just go here and type in 10 and that automatically adjusts it. I'll do that again just so you can see. Let's say we go from 4 inches to 12 inches. And so those are in inches right here, and on the left these are in feet. So let's say that we wanted this to be dashed. We could actually do that. Let's say that we want this to be 8 feet long. You know, it's all messed up because our striping's off, but let's say we want it to be 15 feet off center. And so that's how we can adjust these path presets from these striping presets to whatever you're using. Let's do another example over here. We got this shared use path. Let's say that we want to do a double yellow down here. That may or may not be something you'd actually do, but I just want to show a trick. So once you have this double yellow placed, there are two asset slots, one with the striping unit yellow and the other with the striping unit yellow. But we can adjust one of them if we wanted to do like a passing lane, or maybe we wanted to do a two-way left turn. So we go to, again, our scaling, and we want this to be, let's say, 6 feet, and we want our spacing to be 12 feet. So now we have this change on one side, and these pieces are going to move together because they're all attached to that same path. And so there's a lot of customization that can go on with the striping pavement markings presets. In addition to the lines, we also have a number of arrows. So if we wanted to do these types of arrows, we could do it. Again, you could do this with the path visualizers on or off. Right now I have them off. So if we wanted to do these pavement markings, which are these arrows, then we do it like that. And if we want to adjust the scale, we can just adjust them all like that. Or if we want to adjust the spacing, we can do it either using this slider, or we could do it by typing in whatever distance we want to do, like that. And we also have things like crosswalk markings. So let's say that we wanted to do, let's not do that crosswalk, let's do this one over here. And maybe we want to do this and then delete the crosswalk markings from our base model. You can see here we also have this pink area, and that's something that we could go in our go to hierarchy base model and then find that submesh component and either recolor or turn that off. But if we have this pavement marking for the crosswalk, then we can go to here on the left, and obviously we want to rotate it, so we can rotate it to go the same direction as the traffic. So something kind of like that. Maybe it's even 56. Let's fine tune it. And then we want to adjust the length. So let's unlink the scale. This is 8 feet by default, but we can just use the slider to bring it out where it needs to be, which looks like about 16 feet. And then our spacing, let's say that we want it to be 6 feet instead. And then now we can go use a stop bar on either side and kind of tie that in. So this one doesn't look great because we have the stripes underneath, but hopefully that's a good representation of how you can use these pavement marking presets to quickly add stripes to your model. And again, every path you place will show up in the paths, and so I recommend all of the stripes and the pavement markings, you select all of them, and then you want to wrap them in a folder, and then you can call that striping, and that's going to help with your organization, and also if you wanted to turn those on and off when you're working in your model, especially if things start slowing down. All right, so as mentioned before, I've already kind of worked through this model, so I'm going to delete all these paths I've been placing here. Right click, remove, and then let's delete that striping. And we also want to delete those trees that we placed. And so now I'm going to start turning on some of these folders to show what I've already done here. And this is in Florida, and there are a bunch of trees in this area, and so I used some of our tropical trees to kind of add to that. Again, see these selector icons? You're not going to want that, and so you want to lock it. That way it's not going to be distracting. And as a note, we don't have a brush tool yet, so I had to individually place these. That's why this project took about 3.5 hours to build. But in the future, something like this will go much more quickly. All right, some more trees with this other folder. You can see here. Let's lock that. And then with this one, this is all of the landscaping that I placed. And I used assets from our trees, from our rocks, from our grass to kind of build out some more photorealistic landscaping. And then we also have these sand barrels too as kind of attenuators on the end of those barrier rails. So one by one we've started to see how this model is coming together. If we go to our paths, we can see I'm going to do my striping. Let me zoom in so you can see the difference here. So you can see I've got these crosswalks, I've got the yellow striping. I placed all that using the civil engine striping, and I think most of the arrows were already in from our Openroads Designer model, but this striping tool is really nice to be able to clean it up. And if I wanted to spend the time, I could recreate all of the stripes, but I've just left the ones brought in for Openroads Designer and SketchUp. But you do get some more realism if you do use, as you can see the difference here between the yellow civil engine striping and the default or the imported striping over here. All right, if we continue on our path, we're going to turn on, let's lock this, we don't have those selectors. Let's turn this on, and that's some barrier rail, and then we'll continue. And then finally, the last one is our traffic. And if you didn't notice that difference, let me do that again. Again, these wear paths are something I've spent a lot of time trying to understand what makes roads look more realistic, and if you don't have those on, it does not look as good. So let me turn them off and then back on. And so those come in with those traffic presets, but you could turn them on if you turn them off if you don't like them. But again, in my opinion, it's really going to add to the look of your model. Let's make sure we get all this locked. And so now we have our scene. We also have other features like phasing that I'm not going to cover in this Civil Visualizing with Sam video, but I do want to show how you can use the basic rendering over here on the right. And let's say that we wanted to do an orbit view. I can double right click on the middle of this bridge because I want that to be my orbit point, and then click orbit, and then I can make these adjustments down here in the bottom left to get an orbit view of our project, especially something like this that does have a central location. We can also adjust our orbit angle and orbit speed here. And then if we wanted to do a video, then we could say how long we want that to be and adjust our other parameters, our output folder, and then we can do either screenshots or a video render of that. If you want more advanced rendering, you can do it down here in the publisher. Before I do the publisher though, I want to show how we have Explorer mode. And this is, if you double right click, it will zoom you in and focus your orbit point, and then we can press F1, and now F1, and now we get the opportunity to run around in our project. One note about the traffic is these cars, they're just stationary, they're just placed right there, they're not actually waiting. But when our traffic system is fully fleshed out and we have our intersection controllers, these cars will wait and then they'll go through when it's their turn. But to explore, you can do WASD. I'm holding down shift to run, spacebar to jump. This is our character tray. We may have more characters and more options in the future, but this is a really neat way to explore the project. And then you can press C to switch between first person and third person view. So if you want to show a client what their project's going to look like from this view, you can do that very easily by pressing F1. This also works with Xbox controllers. And if you would rather do a bike view, then we can do that. Let's go over to this side and get on this path right here. Double right click to focus, F2, and now we are ready to write our bike.
To make it swing, diverging diamonds keep the traffic at bay.
Pavement Marking, you know I'm on that grind. Bringing safe roads, you can take ours behind.
If you're down for the design, let me hear you shout.
Let's go.
Keeping roads safe, that's what it's about.
Public outreach, straight.
So I love this project. Again, thank you to Joshua Bears and Ardura for allowing us to use this. I invite you to check out their stuff. And then the last thing we're going to do before we're done is just go to Publisher, and we can set up different images of our project like this. Maybe we want to do a new camera set, add a camera here, add a camera here, and so on. And then from there we can render out this set, and let's pick a resolution. Let's do 4K, and then we want to render that set. Now it's going to render all of those images one by one. All right, if we wanted to do a video, then we can go to video. Let's make a new video, and let's set up keyframes for our video. Let's preview it. Right now it's set for 10 seconds, which is going to be too fast. Let's slow that down. Let's make that a 20-second video. Let's make that 4K. Let's adjust our folder. Frames per second, I always like to do 60. You can just do standard here, this, and then we'll render it out. Up here at the top, render video. Alright, so when I originally did this, this took me about 3.5 hours. A lot of that time was individually placing trees and also the striping. Again, I redid all of the yellow striping, all of the crosswalks, and some other cleanup. And so those are the things that took the most time. but still Civil Engine is the most efficient way to do this type of transportation or other civil projects. My name is Sam Lytle. I'm the founder of BeyondCAD. Our goal is to democratize 3D visualization for transportation and other civil projects. You can learn more about Civil Engine and our other product Beyond Typicals by going to beyondcad.com, and I will talk to you in the next one.
I'm playing those lines, making the vision clear. With every stroke, just proportion you hear. Out the codes and the signs, all in their place. Creating pathways in this urban space. Raise your voice for the changes we make. From city streets to the highways today. Educating fam in a way that's proud. Designed for the people, road for the crowd.